The Christchurch 360 Trail is 130 kilometres of walking tracks that circumnavigate Christchurch through suburbs, wetlands and hills. We'll stop at all the interesting spots along the way, take a few side trips and dig into the city's natural history and its human history. Join me for this 360-degree nerd's eye view of Christchurch.
Last time we followed the Ōpāwaho Heathcote River from Hillmorton back to Aidanfield and then headed to Halswell Quarry at the foot of the Port Hills. In this episode we'll follow the track out of the quarry and make the climb up through Kennedy's Bush to the Summit Road, the partial realisation of Harry Ell's dream. We'll travel back 300 years to discover the grim secrets behind some of the place names, and we'll find a couple of things that can kill you up here today. We'll travel back a few million years to find out how the hills got here, and we'll see where TV used to come from before we had YouTube. We leave Halswell Quarry through the picnic area, past the Adelaide Garden. The leaf sculptures symbolise life and death. The Kaurna people of South Australia use eucalyptus leaves both in healing and in funeral rites, so all bases are covered. A short stretch of track goes through farmland before rejoining Kennedy's Bush Road, so close the gates and behave yourself around the sheep, especially during lambing. We're briefly back on Kennedy's Bush Road, and then the road turns into a track. The first hilltop we see overlooking the bush track is Kitchener's Knoll, named after Lord Kitchener. Yes, that Kitchener. After victories in the Sudan campaigns and the Boer War, Kitchener was promoted to Field Marshal and went on a victory lap of Australia and New Zealand in 1909 and 1910. While in Christchurch, he used this outlook to oversee the Battle of Halswell, a mock battle fought by volunteer infantry to capture these hills from an enemy played by the Canterbury Yeomanry Cavalry. The infantry won the day, but were disappointed that Kitchener, never really a chatterbox, didn't stick around to congratulate them. Kitchener's next appearance in New Zealand history would be in 1915, when he assigned Anzac troops headed for the comparatively well-organised and comfortable Western Front to the catastrophe at Gallipoli. On the upside, Kitchener was involved in planning the evacuation of Gallipoli, the most successful part of the campaign. Kennedy's Bush is named after Thomas Kennedy, an Irishman who went to America, became a whaler and ended up in Akaroa as a constable for the French settlers. He bought 11 hectares of native forest and set up a timber mill. The land that Christchurch is built on was not much more than swamp, and the settlement was constantly short of timber and firewood. We've seen the small grove at Riccarton. A similar stand of timber at Papanui was milled out by 1861. Back in Halswell, we met Harry Ell, or at least saw his grave. But before he was in his grave, he was most famous for championing scenic reserves in the Port Hills and promoting the Summit Road. There's a whole video on Harry Ell elsewhere on this channel. When he was a boy, his favourite way up into the hills was Kennedy's Track. In 1899 he was elected to Parliament, and in the same year the Halswell Road Board decided it was going to close the road. According to the powers that be, the road was an embarrassment to landowners. The Halswell Road went through miles of country with sheep grazing on both sides, and anyone with dogs was at liberty to perambulate up and down them and do any amount of mischief. In 1900, Ell got an amendment to the Public Works Act to make it harder to close roads, and in 1903, the Scenery Preservation Act was passed. In 1906, 20 hectares of Kennedy's Bush was purchased as a Crown Reserve. Kennedy's Bush Track comes out on the Summit Road by Mount Ada. The Summit Road Reserve had been set aside by William Rolleston, Canterbury Provincial Superintendent in the 1870s, but nothing further was done. Ell envisaged a series of reserves in the Port Hills, a summit road connecting them that would allow walkers to get from the hills above Christchurch to Akaroa, and a series of 20 or so rest houses along the way. He spent more than 30 years pursuing this vision. Eventually, the road reached from Godley Head to Gebby's Pass. 4 rest houses were built, and legislation was passed to preserve the skyline. The protection of the skyline wasn't 100% successful, as you can see from the bloody great big radome on Cass Peak. This is a Thales secondary surveillance radar, operated by Airways New Zealand. Secondary surveillance means it doesn't rely on radar reflections, but picks up transponder signals from aircraft, so you can click on things in Flight Radar 24 and see what's going on. Cass Peak's Māori name, Ōrongomai, means the place where voices are heard, but it's nothing to do with the radar. It has a more sinister origin that takes us back to the 18th century. The 360 trail heads northeast from here, but if we followed the summit road in the other direction, we'd come to the highest point in the Port Hills, Cooper's Knob. The peak is known in Māori as Ōmawete and commemorates the place where Ngāti Māmoe chief Mawete met his end. In the early 18th century, Ngāi Tahu was working its way down the east coast of the South Island, conquering land occupied by Ngāti Māmoe. There are no written records, so dates are estimated by whakapapa, genealogy, but let's say the Port Hills campaign was around 1720. Towards the end of this phase of the conquest, surviving Ngāti Māmoe under Rangatira, or Chief Mawete, had retreated to the Manuka Pā, or fortress near Taitapu. One day, Mawete led a fishing party over the hill to hunt for sharks in the harbour, and was ambushed by Ngāi Tahu Rangatira Te Rangi Whakaputa. Te Rangi Whakaputa and his band killed Mawete and most of his party. My main source for these stories, Māori Folktales of the Port Hills, gleefully describes the nutritional value of the defeated warriors. But 100 years after it was written, it's a lot less fashionable to talk about such things. So, we'll move on. Ōrongomai is just north of Ōmawete. The place where voices are heard is the poetic name for the site of a massacre. Prior to the final defeat of Mawete, Ngāi Tahu warriors had been working their bloody way up the harbour. Te Rangi Whakaputa and his men took the Ngāti Māmoe Pā at Ohinetahi. The site is now Governor's Bay School. Te Rangi Whakaputa's scouts heard voices in the hills, a party of Ngāti Māmoe in the bush. They chased and killed them, and the place name remembers the skirmish. A few survivors escaped back to the Manuka Pā. Earlier parts of Ngāi Tahu's Port Hills campaign are remembered in place names further along the track. Anyway, let's jump back to where we left the Christchurch 360 trail to Mount Ada, where Kennedy's bush track joins the summit road. Mount Ada is named after Harry Ell's wife Adelaide. One of the perks of being Mr. Port Hills is easy access to free brownie points. The Crater Rim track skirts round the city side of the hill, and Ella's track goes round the harbour side. Ella's track was also named by Ell, this time after someone else's wife. Halswell and Heathcote County Councils didn't want anything to do with Ell's expensive schemes, so Ell went straight to Government Surveyor Albert George Allam to do survey work for the Summit Road and Dyers Pass Road. In part payment, Ell named the track after Allam's wife, Ella. On the slopes of Mount Ada is Bivvy Rock, a crag used by rock climbers. The rock face is about 20 metres high, and there are a couple of dozen routes marked out. They're graded between 17 and 26 on the Eubank system, which to climbers means intermediate to difficult. For normal people, 17 means impossible, and 26 means you will definitely die. Just along the trail is Hoon Scenic Reserve, not to be confused with Hoon the suburb, which we skirted round when we walked from Hillmorton to Halswell. A lot of the vegetation up here is scrub, broom and gorse that's come along after the land was cleared by fire or logging. Gorse is a fire climax plant. It burns easily but can regrow from its roots, and its seeds germinate after being scorched. Gorse is unpleasant, but this stuff is really nasty. Ongaonga literally means distaste or revulsion, and it's also the name for the native tree nettle, a giant stinging nettle that can grow 3 meters tall. The Latin name, Urtica ferox, means fierce itch. The white spines cause painful stings. Mostly it's just an annoyance, but in a few cases it has killed people, It's been used in traditional medicine, and apparently it can be used to treat venereal disease, although if I had gonorrhea, giant neurotoxic death nettle isn't the first thing I'd apply to the affected area. If you have gonorrhea, seek professional medical advice. Do not rub stinging nettles on your genitals. You may be a stallion, but this shit can kill a horse. Like some dude went skinny dipping, stumbled into the bush, got this stuff all on him, and died. Neurotoxic, contains histamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, and delta UF1A and beta delta UF2A peptides. Can cause hives, numbness, itchiness, ataxia, blurred vision, confusion, polyneuropathy, respiratory distress, hypersalivation, and death. Your mileage may vary. Ongaonga is the primary host plant for the New Zealand red admiral butterfly. The caterpillars eat the leaves and curl them up for protection. The red admiral's Māori name is Kahuhura, which means red cloak, and is a word we'll hear again soon. The trail takes a quick detour from the crater rim walkway along Trig 5. From here, you can take a quick side trip down Faulkner's Track for some spectacular views over Governor's Bay and Lyttelton Harbour. From here, it's easy to see Lyttelton Harbour's volcanic origins. The Port Hills are the eroded rim of the Lyttelton Volcano. When Captain Cook chartered to Waipunamu, he named this area Banks's Island in honour of Joseph Banks, naturalist, patron of the sciences, and South Sea's dusky maiden enjoyer. Cook was only wrong about the island thing by a few thousand years. For many millions of years, this was all open ocean. About 15 million years ago, numerous small volcanoes erupted at what's now the head of the harbour. Around 12 million years ago, the Lyttelton Volcano began erupting, with its main vent around what's now Charteris Bay. It took about 1 million years to build up a large shield volcano. The bigger cone at Akaroa was built up around 8 million years ago. Halswell Quarry was a small blister that formed on the flanks of the volcano as activity died down. Since then, the craters have eroded and the sea has broken through, forming the two harbours we see today. Marley's Hill is next up on the northern side of Hoon Valley. William Marley was an architect and builder, and Marley's Hill was the site of an early quarry. Access down the hill is by Worsley's Track. Watch out for the loose gravel on some parts of the track. Luckily, my bones took the impact of my fall, so the camera's okay. Worsley's Road is named after Henry Worsley, who built the road and who was the grandfather of Antarctic explorer Frank Worsley. Today, Marley's Hill is best known for the Christchurch Adventure Park. If you don't like the uphill slog bit of mountain biking, the 1.8km chairlift will bring you up to the terminal just below the summit road. The park is on 360 hectares of hillside and boasts 50 kilometres of bike tracks. Even if you're not into extreme sports, it's worth coming up here just for the view of the city, the Southern Alps, the Kahuhuras in the distance, Pegasus Bay, Sugarloaf, Lyttelton, and the harbour round to Quail Island. Behind the chairlift is a collection of radio repeaters that provides communications for St John Ambulance and the rescue helicopters, fire and emergency, and civil defence, as well as amateur ham radio and digital mobile radio for Electrical Lines Company Orion. The Adventure Park opened in December 2016, but was closed in February 2017 as a result of the Port Hills fires. 1,600 hectares of land was burned, with the loss of 9 houses. Pilot Steve Askin was killed when his helicopter crashed on the second day of the fire. Fires began in 2 places, the first because of an electrical fault and the second believed to have been deliberately lit. Another fire in 2024 started in almost the same location, burned 700 hectares and destroyed 1 house and some of the radio equipment. Some damage is still visible. Follow the crater rim track until it crosses the summit road, but don't cross. Go an extra 50 metres up the road and check out the exposed rock face. As magma pushes up a volcanic dome, cracks radiate out from the centre and magma from later eruptions gets forced into the cracks. Lyttelton has one of the best radial dike swarms in the world, and part of it is exposed here. A crack in the original lava dome has been pushed open by a wide trachyte dike, which in turn has cooled and cracked and been intruded on by 2 basaltic dikes, with another to the side. A bit further along we come to Coronation Hill Scenic Reserve. The reserve was named to commemorate the coronation of King George V in 1911, back when there was still broad public interest in such things. The track goes round the harbour side of the hill and comes out at Dyers Pass Road. Dyers Pass, also known as Puke Atua, was a traditional travel route between settlements near the harbour and food gathering areas on the plains. The ridge we've just walked along was called Otutohu Kai, the place where food was pointed out. When the road was put through in 1859, the workmen were led by local farmer John Dyer, and the road was named after him. The first sod was turned for the summit road here at Dyers Pass in 1908, with the first section of the road running to Kennedy's Bush Reserve. On the corner today is the sign of the Kiwi, another of Harry Ell's planned rest houses, opened in 1917. Ell was a lot better at spending money than raising it, and the sign of the Kiwi was supposed to double as a toll house to collect tolls for the summit road. The toll gates are a constant source of friction with the council and with motorists. There's more on Harry Ell, the summit road and the sign of the Kiwi in my Harry Ell video, which I'll link in the description. Across the road is Sugarloaf, known in Māori as Te Heru o Kahuhura, the head comb of Kahuhura. Kahuhura literally means red cloak, and you'll remember that it's the Māori name for the red admiral butterfly. Kahuhura is also the atua or god of rainbows. He was the most important deity to Ngāi Tahu, regularly consulted by tohunga for fortune telling. Somewhere in the Kashmir Hills, near where Dyers Pass Road begins, was Te Irika o Kahuhura, a sacred place where a statue of Kahuhura was kept. Sugarloaf is dominated by the 121-metre transmission tower that broadcasts terrestrial television and FM radio to Canterbury. Television began in Canterbury with CHTV3 on the 1st of June 1961, broadcasting from a studio in Gloucester Street. Transmission moved to Sugarloaf in 1965. According to New Zealand TV Weekly, the most popular programme in the mid-1960s in Christchurch was The Avengers. Before Nielsen ratings, the popularity of TV programmes was measured by watching the City Council's water gauges and seeing how much water consumption dropped as the newfangled technology synchronised everyone's toilet breaks. Nowadays, you can watch YouTube all night, but 50 years ago, the TV told you when to go to bed. Next time, we'll continue along the crater rim. We'll meet Tamatea Pokai Whenua, a legendary explorer from the deep mists of history, come across more grisly place names, and see why getting over or under these hills has always been so difficult. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for part 4 of this 360-degree Nerd's Eye view of Christchurch.